What's up, everybody? Here's the challenge. I gave you a file with 6 shapes in it and asked you to try to create the closest representation or duplicate copy that you can of these 6 shapes. In this video, I'm going to break down each one of the 6 and show you how they were made, what tips and tricks I used, and how I would go about creating something like this in my actual practice. Let's get started. Alright, so I'm going to go through these one at a time, starting with number 1, which is this heart shape here. So looking at this shape, what I see is that it's mostly, or it has most in common with a circle. So I'm going to go to my ellipse tool. I can do that by hitting L on the keyboard. I can find it underneath my rectangle tool again. And I'm going to draw out an ellipse. I'll zoom in on that. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to convert some of these anchor points because I know that the heart at the very least has a point at the bottom. And if we remember, our ellipse is 4 anchor points, and all 4 of those anchor points are curved. So I'm going to go to this Convert Anchor Point tool, or again, Shift and C. That brings up the Convert or the Anchor Point tool. And I'm going to make not only that point a angled point, but I'm going to do the same to the top one. Now, I'm going to go to my Direct Selection tool, or I could hit the letter A. I'm going to grab that top point. I'm just going to hit the down arrow on my keyboard and hold it. I can hold Shift and move down. It'll move quicker that way. It'll go by 10. You can see that that already kind of looks like a heart. I can do the same thing with that, or I could click it and I could drag it, and if you hold Shift, it'll keep it in line. Angles are a little weird here, so if I click on each of these side points, I get handles, and again, I'm on my Direct Selection tool. And I can curve out the sides of this heart however much I want. So I'm going to bring this down. I can bring it out. Bring that up a little if I want. Right, and there you go. It's a little odd shaped on that side. I can probably tweak a little bit. All right, and that's the basic heart shape. All right, and that's one of many ways that you can make a heart. Now, if I want to take this a bit further and I want to match it exactly, when I look at the other one, it has a pink gradient and it's on a bit of an angle. It has a pink stroke. So looking at all those things, it's a dark to light pink. I can jump back over here and I'll do a couple things. I'll pull out my gradient tool, my gradient palette, I should say, not my gradient tool, and I'll pull out my swatches. All right, and so let's add a black and white gradient to this. I'll select that with my selection tool, click on a gradient, and I'm going to just alter the angle of that gradient. All right, so the top was a little lighter, so I'm going to look for a lighter pink color and a darker pink color. So I'll start with the darker. And here, I actually just like the pink that's in there, so I'm just going to click into this, and it'll create a color stopper there. I can move the white away. And this is backwards, so let me just flip it, reverse gradient. I could move the midpoint slider a little if I wanted to. And that gives me a little bit of a harsher transition. All right, and lastly, I can go to my stroke, give that a magenta or pink stroke. And I believe the other one was on an angle. So again, selection tool, click outside, and just rotate it a little bit. And that gives me a heart shape just like the first one. All right, and maybe not the exact right colors, but pretty close. All right, moving on to number 2 is this bell shape. I'm going to do something pretty similar here. I'm going to start out with an oval. So I'm going to go to my ellipse tool. Again, I could hit L. And it is good to have those memorized. I'm going to switch this back to black and white just to start out the drawing. And now, what I'm going to do is grab these anchor points here, and I can see this bell shape that I need to kind of be flat on one side and curved out. And all I'm going to do is grab this handle here and just kind of angle that out. And now I get this weird sort of wave distortion there. I'm going to do the same on the other side. And then just move this bottom up. And that might be a little extreme. Might not need to go quite that far out. And if you're trying to get this exact and you can't feel like, you're not getting it quite the way you need, another option is to put it right on top of the original shape and work from there, because then you can find sort of exactly what you need. And I'll even go as far as to take out that fill color and do a bright color, something that's not in the original shape. So something like a bright blue, for example. Swap these, take out that fill. All right. And now what I can do is grab my direct selection tool. If I wanted to get the exact shape and dimensions that I had before, I can do that this way. All right, and there it is. But that's just a circle distorted a few times. All right. Next thing is I need another circle, so another ellipse. And I'm going to hold Option to drag out from the center. I'm also going to hold Shift. And it's going to give me a perfect circle out from the center. Kind of move that around, get it where I need it to be. That looks about right. And now the next thing is the stripe across. And there's a few different ways you could probably do this. First way that comes to my mind is I'm just going to draw a rectangle. Which seems like an odd choice probably. There's my rectangle. And I'll knock out that fill so you can see through it. And what I'm going to do is grab my direct selection tool. And if I start to move this around, you see, it's just going to move that up and down. What I first need to do is grab my convert anchor point tool. And if I grab in here and I pull down, what that's going to do is it's going to create this sort of arc. And I can match that up to the top of the ribbon. Drag this down, and that matches up to the bottom of the ribbon. And now I can go in and I can grab my white arrow, my direct selection tool. And I can just line these up with that bell as best I can. All right. And next up is the color for these guys. So I'm going to move all three of these back to my original area that I was working. I'm just going to do Command X, cut it away. Put it over here somewhere, Command V. All right. So let's start with the bell itself. We need some color. So one thing I can do is if I want to get these exact colors is I can use my eyedropper. Say eyedrop that dark brown. All right, I like that. I'm going to save it. Eyedrop this pale yellow. Save that. And I'm just saving it by grabbing the swatch from here and dragging it into my swatches palette. And that looks like white, but it's probably not exactly white. And again, I click here, drag it there, let go, and now I have these three colors for that gradient. Gets a little darker again, but I think that's probably just that medium color. Now, I'm going to grab this, and with my gradient, put one there, one there, one there, and that's that highlight, and it does get dark again, so I'm just going to hold Option and drag this one out, and it gets darker again. And now I could also tweak the angle of this, and I might want to make this a bit whiter. Just going to slide these points in. And the the last thing that stops that from really looking realistic is that it has a stroke. So if I remove that stroke, that looks a lot better already. This is a really similar setup, but instead of it being these browns, they're reds. I can probably just get away with cranking up the magenta in each of these, because it's more or less the same tone. And once again, changing the angle. And in this case, probably the placement a little bit. Move it over just a little because it looks like it's a slightly different depth. All right. Same thing. I'm going to get rid of the stroke on that. Lastly here, I want this behind everything else. So I'm just going to right click, arrange, send to back. That puts that circle behind. And now I could eyedrop this gradient here. And of course, that's not what the ball actually looks like. That's because it's a linear gradient. We're just going to change that to this button here, which is a radial gradient. We'll pull the highlights a little different. We'll swap the order of this first off. And now for this, I'm going to go to my gradient tool, or I can hit the letter G. And something like that. And that will give me sort of the look of a round sphere underneath. Now, the one thing you may notice is here, it looks like there's a bit of a lip or a second area here. I can make a copy of this. So I can do Command C and a couple things. I can do Command V for paste. It'll give me another one. I can do Command F and it'll paste right on top. And here I'll do arrange, send to back, or send backwards rather. And that's going to go behind the stripe. And then I'm going to do it one more time. Arrange, send backward. And I'm just going to use the arrow keys to move it down a little and over a little. And what that does is it gives me a second shape underneath, and all I need to do for that guy, this underneath one, is just make each one of these, I can make it a little bit darker, or I could just move them over a little bit. And what that's going to do is it's going to offset those gradients just a little bit to make it look like this has an actual edge or a lip to it. And that now looks like it has that kind of three-dimensional look. All right, so that is the bell. All right, 2 down. All right, for the third shape, I have this kind of snowflake looking one. This is going to be a little harder to probably get exact, but we'll see what we can do. So the first shape I want to start out with here that I see is a very shallow 6-pointed star. So I'm going to switch back to my black and white. I can minimize my gradient for a little bit. I don't need it right now. All right. And for this, I'm going to go to my Shapes tools, go to my star, and I'm just going to click once to pull up my options. So I know that this is a 6-pointed star, and it's a pretty shallow change. So if I did the radius as radius 1 as an inch, I'd maybe do 1.25. And this is just trial and error. This is experimentation. And I hit OK. And that's kind of what I needed. That's sort of a shallow star. But you can see it doesn't just do that. It kind of comes out. It has these sort of like weird marshmallowy hump shapes to it. So I'm going to add another shape to that. I'm going to grab my ellipse tool. I'm going to try to line up where it says intersect, but I'm going to try to get it. There you go. Looks about the center. Holding Shift and Option, I'll draw out a perfect circle just to barely cover those indentations. There you go. And that kind of has the right look. Maybe not exact. Theirs is on an angle. It looks like it's a little shorter this way. Something like that. All right, so it's a circle and a 6-pointed shallow star. I'm going to go into my Pathfinders, so I can do that in my Pathfinder tools, or it's in my properties panel. And I'm just going to choose to unite. Now, again, I talked about in this video, holding options so that this becomes a live shape that I can go back and change later. All right, but that gives me the shape that I kind of needed. All right, and now I'm going to grab my white arrow, and I'm going to round the corners ever so slightly. Not very much. All right, I can zoom in, do that a little bit more. All right, so that rounded out these corners. And that kind of gets the shape that I'm looking for. So now I need to take away the middle. I'll first eyedrop some colors. So I'll say that purple or lavender kind of color I'll save. And then this light blue I can save. And this middle blue. All right. So now I'm going to put a linear gradient because I see it goes in stripes. So here's the first color. Pull these guys out. Second color. And third color. And as I do each of those, this one needs to be here as well. Okay. And again, a little bit of an angle. This is a pretty wide area of that color, and this is a lot wider of that color. And these are all just the fine-tuning kind of adjustments you get to make. All right, it does have a blue or a cyan stroke of some sort. It's a little thicker. All right, the only thing is missing is I need to cut out that middle area. So I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to make a copy. And I'm going to paste again in front, so Command F. And I can just shrink this in a tiny bit. And now I have two of them. And with our Pathfinders, we can minus front, and again, I'll hold Option if I want, make that a compound shape. And this gives me something that's pretty similar to that shape there. So if you get something like that, that's, I'd say, pretty good. All right. And that is the third shape. It's not exact, but it gets the right idea. It shows that you know the tools. And again, this is not just a white shape in the middle. It's an actual hole in it. All right. So that is number 3. All right. Moving on to shape number 4. Is this green kind of hard edge shape. And this is the one that I notice a lot of students look, and this is where you kind of have to start to adjust what you see. So some people see a square with this very ruffly edge, and so their thought is make a square and add anchor points and curve them around and things like that. And that's not really what I see when I look at it. I see a whole bunch of circles that happen to be in a square alignment. I'm going to show you a couple tricks that make this one really, really easy if you do it in kind of the most efficient way. All right, I'm going to grab a circle. And I want to do this one very precise math-wise. So I'm just going to click once with my circle. And let's just do an easy number to remember. I'll do 0.5 inches. If yours is by points, you do something like 36 points. And I have 0.5 and 0.5. And there's my circle. Okay. Now I want another circle exactly next to it. Okay. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to grab my arrow, I'm going to right click on it. And if I go to transform and move, I can tell Illustrator that I don't want to move vertically at all. I want to stay exactly on the same line. But I do want to move over by 0.5 inches because I know that's the exact width of that circle. So now if I do preview on and off, I'll see that's where it was, that's where it'll be. I don't want to just move it though, I want to make a copy. So I hit copy. Now the last thing I did was make this copy. And if you remember with the video I did for transform tools, I talked about Command D or step and repeat or transform again. So by holding Command and hitting D, it repeats another copy to the right. And if I do this, there was about 10 in that square, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I now have 10 circles that are perfectly lined up and touch right on the edge. I'm going to grab all of these, right click, and choose group. So now it's one shape. So now if I grab it, I don't have to worry about moving just one of them. All right. A couple things I can do here. I can hold Option, and I can drag on this, and it'll pull out an exact copy. I can then hold Shift if I go just outside the corner to rotate. I can hold Shift and make a complete perfect 90-degree rotation. I can line these up with each other. And then I can group these, Command G. All right. So that's a nice way to do that. I can then grab them again. Option, drag off, rotate it 180 degrees, line them back up. And now grab all of these and Command G. So there are a bunch of circles there. It doesn't look exactly like this guy because the middle, all I have to do then is grab a rectangle, put my cursor in the center, hold Shift, draw a perfect square out. That's kind of that overall shape. And now, thanks to the Pathfinder tools, I can unite all these as one big shape. And now I can hold Shift, shrink it down, go to my swatches, and throw a green fill on that guy. And that is that shape exactly. All right, so that one's super simple if you could figure it out. The hardest part of that one is figuring out how it's done. Once you know it, it takes 2 seconds. All right, so number 4 is done. All right, for number 5, we're going to do almost the same thing as we did for number 4. It's really the same, but with squares instead of circles, and there's no shape filling the middle. I'll do it a little bit of a different way just to show you some other variations, other options, but more or less this is the same idea. So I grab, this time, a rectangle instead of a circle. And let's do the same thing. We'll do a 0.5 and a 0.5. There's my square. And now I'm going to rotate it. And I didn't have to do that. I could have eyeballed it. I'm just trying to be very precise here. All right. Right click, transform, and move. 0.5 and 0. That's perfect. And copy. There's my 2. Just get this out of the way. So now I can do 3. Again, Command D is repeating it. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now I'll grab them all and Command G for group. Now I'll do something a little different. Instead of just dragging, holding Alt or Option and dragging out a copy, what I'll do instead is I'm going to go to my Rotate tool. And a Rotate tool is just a dedicated tool for rotation. What's nice about it is you can choose the rotation point or that pivot point. So I can say rotate from here, right? And it swings around instead of swinging around from the center. Now why this is useful is because now that I have that point there, once I start dragging, if I now add into the mix Option, it creates copies. So if I add Option and Shift, so I start dragging, I then hit Option, and I'm holding Option and Shift, it'll go to 45 and 90. And there you go. It gave me that copy perfectly 90 degrees from that edge. I'm going to find the middle of this bottom one. So I'm going to rotate from this pivot point right there. Click, hold Option, hold Shift. Rotate from this point right here. And now I have this whole setup. They've got these little indentations. I grab the whole thing, Pathfinder once again, and Unite. All right. Now the color on this one's a little unique. It's light blue on one half, dark blue on the other. And that is a gradient, even though it doesn't look like a gradient. And the way we can do that, once I shrink this down, is I'm going to add a fill to it. All right, so something like that, or maybe a lighter blue. All right, so there's my light blue. I'm going to go back to my gradient tool. Click on this gradient. I'm going to just ditch these guys here. There's my gradient. I'm going to add a dark blue to the other side. But it's not a very even gradient. What I do is I put this little diamond divider in the middle, and then I just bring these colors in so that they're as close as they can get to each other. And then I can just decide where that changes, right? And that is still a gradient. It's just there's really no smooth transition between colors. And if I wanted it exactly in the middle, there you go. And that's the perfect middle of those two. All right. That is number 5. Oh, once again, actually, we're not totally done. This one has no stroke. So I will take that stroke off. And there you go. That's my color. All right. That's it for number 5. All right, now that brings us to the last one. That's number 6. This guy right here. And I'll be honest, this one's probably what I would say is the hardest. And there's a reason for that. The reason I think this is the most challenging one is simply that it's not what you think it is, probably. Now, there's more than likely a few ways to do this. I'm going to say that getting a gradient to go on multiple angles is really challenging for you guys that tried this one. I'm sure you found that. It's very hard to get gradients to go in multiple angles. Now, there's a couple different ways you could work with this, with a stroke. I'm going to show you an illusion that I would use to create something like this and see how well that works. So I'm going to go and make an ellipse. All right, and let's just zoom in on that guy nice and close. And I'm going to give this a gradient. I'll give it a black and white gradient for a fill. But not just black and white, actually. Let me see. Okay, so I just want to see how those colors go. So let's swap this. So it's black. Then it goes white. And black. And then white. And you'll see why I'm doing this in a second. All right. Okay. So I have something like this black and white gradient. And what I'm doing is I'm just looking across the middle what the colors are. So it's black, then it's white, then it's black again, then it's white again. So just picking any kind of single line and looking at the color choice. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab this. I'm going to right-click and choose Transform and Scale. And I'm going to make this about 97%. Let's see, I'll turn that on and off again. Maybe 98%. Really, really, really similar. 98%. And make a copy of it. All right, it's probably really hard to see what that even did. But I just have this second circle here. Okay? Now, I'm going to go in and I'm going to turn the stroke off. I'm going to actually delete that guy and just do this again so you can see it closer. So you can see why I would do this. So I have this shape, right click, transform, scale, 98%, make a copy. And what you might see is that because this is a little bit smaller, that black for this part of the gradient is indented a little bit more. Like this one doesn't line up with that one quite. So Command D, it moves in a little more. Command D again. Now if I just keep hitting Command D, each one of those is indented just a little bit more than the last. And these are all at 98%. It's constantly scaling and duplicating the shape 98%. If I just hold down Command D, it'll continue on, continue on, continue on, continue on. And now the last middle one, I'm just going to give it a white fill. And as I zoom out, you'll see that appears to be the same look. So what many people look at this and think they're looking at a circle. In fact, you're looking at many, many, many circles. One way you can see the outlines of things in Illustrator is if you hold Command and hit the letter Y. And you can see everything in outline view. To switch back, you hit Command Y again. But that shows how many shapes are actually making this up. This actually has a very different look if I had a stroke on it. So if there was a stroke, you'd see all these different kind of separate pieces. But without the stroke, it blends nice and smoothly. All right. And something happened to my gradient guy up here. I must have clicked off of it, but with the exception of that one, this one's a little off. You guys can see these are pretty accurate representations. Hopefully yours looks something similar to that. So what I would encourage you to do now is to keep playing around with these. Try to figure out how you could use these techniques for patterns, for shapes, for illustrations, and using any of these for other little background pieces, things like that in your personal illustrations and your design work. Hopefully you understood how all those went together. If not, you can always comment and I'll try to explain things as best I can. But give it a shot, upload what you have, let other people see it, get some critiques, and experiment around with these, all right? Thank you guys very much. I know that was a long one, but I will see you in the next video.